I have always carried a heavy heart since the day I first realized that I was an outsider in my own marriage. I still remember the moment I stepped into her family's home, a grand, cold space filled with polite smiles that never touched the eyes of those around me. I felt as if I were walking on thin ice, each step a reminder that I was not welcome. I worked hard every day, leaving my sweat and tears on the job so that my wife and I could have a roof over our heads and a table filled with food. Yet, despite my efforts, her family made it clear that I was less than what they expected. I have often wondered if they saw me as someone who did not belong, someone whose mere presence was a silent rebuke to their way of life. Every visit to her parents' house was like stepping into a gauntlet. I remember the icy glares from her mother, piercing through me like a pointed razor. I felt small, almost inconspicuous, yet brutally noted for all the wrong reasons. Her eyes held a silent judgment that made my heart sink even further. I tried to shake off the feeling, to believe that perhaps I was overthinking things, that I was simply misunderstood. But as the days passed, it became increasingly clear that no matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up to the standards set by her family. I recall one particular visit. As I sat silently at the dinner table, hushed voices exchanged sharp looks and whispered words. I was there physically, yet emotionally, I was pushed aside, forced to listen to a chorus of disapproval that seemed to echo in every corner of the room. My wife, instead of offering a kind word or even a fleeting gaze of sympathy, stayed wordless, her silence more damning than any verbal rebuke could have been. At that moment, I felt a terrible loneliness, as if I were the only one actually present, while everyone else performed a part in a harsh scenario that had been crafted without me in mind. I have often questioned my own worth in the wake of such relentless rejection. Was I not a good man? Had I not tried with all my might to be the husband she deserved? I spent many sleepless nights replaying every interaction in my mind, attempting to find a reason, an explanation, or perhaps a spark of hope that someday things might change. But with every passing day, the realization grew stronger. I was living in a constant state of isolation, a stranger in a world that was meant to be my home. Even as I strove to be kind and caring, to support my wife in every possible way, her family's disapproval clung to me persistently. Their behavior was like a gradual poison, spreading into every element of our life, leaving a sour aftertaste that no amount of love or dedication could wash away. I began to feel that my efforts were futile, that no amount of hard work could ever earn me a place at their table, both physically and metaphorically. In the quiet moments of meditation, I wondered if I was destined to be the outsider, eternally imprisoned in a marriage where I was constantly reminded of my inadequacies. Today, as I stand at the threshold of another day, the memories of those traumatic encounters return with unrelenting clarity. I am left to grapple with the harsh truth that, despite all I have given, I remain an intruder in a family that never embraced me. The constant rejection, the silent, scornful glances, they have worn me down, leaving scars that run deep within my soul. I struggle to reconcile the man I believe I am with the way I am seen by those who are supposed to be close to my wife. Each moment spent in their presence is a reminder that I will never be enough, that the warmth of a family is meant for someone else, someone who fits neatly within their environment without causing any ripples. It had been an ordinary day when my wife mentioned the celebration. I remember her calm voice, as if she were telling me of a small event rather than a family gathering. That had always been a source of pain for me. She said, "You should come." And though her words sounded easy, I could not help but feel a terrible anxiety descend over me. I knew that her family rarely extended an invitation, and when they did, I was confident it would simply lead to further pain and sorrow. I sat in the quiet of our living room that night, my mind racing with doubts and worries. I thought of all the times I had been forced to attend their events, each one filled with silent mockery and sharp looks. The idea of stepping into that room again made my heart pound with dread. I recalled the cruel smiles, the harsh whispers that had become all too familiar. Deep inside, I knew that this invitation was not a chance for acceptance, but a reminder of my place as an outsider in their world. Yet my wife's gentle insistence made me feel as though I had no choice. Her eyes, soft and hopeful, held a promise of something different. I remembered the many evenings when her silence had spoken louder than any words, leaving me feeling small and unworthy. Still, in that moment, her voice was warm and inviting, as if she truly believed. Maybe this time, things would change. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend the celebration, even though a storm of apprehension built in my heart. I vividly recall the moment when I first recognized that the visit was far from done, and that the insult was going to reach a new, terrible level. I had invited them inside my home, thinking perhaps we could finally have an honest conversation. But as soon as they sat down in my living room, it became clear that this was not a gathering meant to heal old wounds. They took their seats as if they owned every inch of the space, as if I were a mere accessory to their plan. My mother-in-law, with her eyes cold and calculating, fixed her gaze on me and began speaking, as if scripted sentences were being delivered without a touch of sorrow. "About last night," she started, her voice smooth and laced with false sweetness. "We need to settle the matter." I stood there, stunned, as her words slowly sank in like a slow poison. For a moment I believed she might offer a hint of apology, a softening of the tone. But instead she continued, "We need you to cover the bill." Her words echoed in the silent room, and I felt a burst of fury coupled with disbelief. I had endured so much humiliation previously, but now they wanted me to pay for the dinner, a dinner that had been organized to showcase their superiority and to remind me, once again, of my place. My wife, who had remained silent for so long, simply shrugged, as if the request was normal. "You have money," she said in a tone that left no room for debate. "And you can afford it." Her casual dismissal of my feelings stung more than the insults that had come before. It was as if my years of sacrifice were being measured by the size of my wallet rather than the depth of my love or the sweat I had shed day in and day out. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, and a tightness grasped my chest as I attempted to process the severity of it all. Here I was, a man who had always tried to be supportive, who had given his best in every way possible, and now I was being expected to shoulder the financial load of an evening I had never agreed to bear. The room, filled with their patronizing looks and well-rehearsed expressions, seemed to close in on me. Every detail of that moment replayed in my mind. The way they had gazed at me with disgust, the whisper of their unsaid judgments, and the way my wife's eyes had fallen away every time I sought even a glimpse of kindness or understanding. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of emotion flowing inside me. "Cover the bill?" I repeated, my voice low and strained, as if uttering those words might somehow make the reality of the situation easier to accept. My father-in-law shifted in his seat, a gesture that hinted at discomfort, yet he offered no further explanation. "It was a big expense," he mumbled, his tone evasive. "And since you were not contributing in any other way, we thought it fair that you help out." His words only deepened the wound. Fair? There was nothing fair about being compelled to pay for a night that had been created purely to remind me of my shortcomings and to belittle my very existence. I looked around the room, feeling every eye fixated on me with a mix of pity and superiority, as if I were some sort of charity case they were forced to help. The quiet rustle of fabric and the barely concealed amusement in their eyes filled the space, and with each passing second, my anger grew. I remembered the countless times I had stayed silent, swallowing my pride and accepting the insults as part of my life. But now, as I stood in my own living room, facing them, I knew I could not allow this indignity to continue. Every word they had spoken, every look of disdain, had led to this moment. The invitation to dinner, the mocking treatment at the restaurant, and now this demand. It felt like the final blow in a series of endless insults. I felt as if I were drowning in a sea of humiliation, forced to repay a debt that had nothing to do with money, but everything to do with my dignity. My hands clenched at my sides, and I struggled to keep my voice steady, knowing that this was the moment that would define whether I would continue to be the silent victim or finally speak out against the cruelty that had become my life. With a slow, deliberate motion, I took a step forward, closing the distance between us as I stared directly at my mother-in-law. The room fell even quieter, as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for my response. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination, and I felt every ounce of my long-suppressed frustration come rushing to the surface. "I have done more than enough for this family," I said, my voice trembling with raw emotion. "And I will not be treated like a bank account for your careless mistakes." The words hung in the air, a declaration of defiance that shattered the carefully constructed illusion of family unity. For a few long moments, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, charged with the weight of my anger and the undeniable truth that had finally surfaced.